In today's episode, Dr. Moshe Daniel Block dives deep into the question of who am I? He provides us with some practical tips on how we can catch when we're operating from the limited self of the ego and when we are truly connected to who we really are. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our show as we are getting towards the end of our series on Know Thyself. And after Dr. Moshe today, we have one last episode, and that will be me sharing my personal experience around this concept as well. But today we're going to talk to Moshe. And if you guys have watched the episode before, I had Moshe back some time back, and we had a really eloquent conversation. And he was also part of the Follow Your Oath group when we were sharing a lot of different information, sharing a different narrative to what was going on in the world over the past 2 years. I really admire Moshe. He's a fellow naturopathic doctor. And, I remember when I first met Moshe back over 20 years ago, back at naturopathic school. He graduated 2 years before I did. And I remember when we would go to school, the school at the time was right downtown in Toronto. And we would go to this skyscraper and we'd be on the upper two floors where the college was. And then we'd leave and everybody would go back to the subway and get back home and all this kind of stuff. And I would often see Moshe out sitting down with a bunch of people that were all homeless, and he'd sit there with his guitar and he'd just be singing along and singing songs for them. And I remember not even knowing who Moshe was, but seeing this scenario happen very often and just thinking, man, that's a really solid guy. Like, he just hanging out there playing his guitar with whoever wanted to come and join him. And I always really admired Moshe, and as I've gotten to know him better over the past couple of years as well, he really is an integrous person. And so I wanted to bring him on here to share his thoughts around this concept of getting deeper into who we actually are. And so he actually breaks down the question of who am I? And really helps us understand that. And not only does he help us understand that, but he starts to give some tips on where you can catch yourself to know when you are operating from that aspect of who you really are, the deeper, more truthful, the reality of who we really are, and when we are acting from that limited self. And this is really important because we often need to have something to kind of catch when we're operating from the true self versus when we're not. This is all part of operating from this place of authenticity and integrity. And so he has some really great strategies that he talks about in that regard. One of the things that we talked about in this episode is where are we holding on really tightly to in our lives? And he gets into deeper conversation around that, but that's a really important one to take a look at. In what areas of our life are we really holding on tightly to? Are we struggling to be able to let go more of? These are some of the important places where we need to take a look at. And a lot of times we're operating from that limited self versus the more expanded self. So he gets into a couple things along those lines that I think are really valuable to pay attention to. So take a look at those. So watch the video and see what comes up for you, and then put those into practice. Now, I've got a really big surprise for everyone. We are going to be bringing back 3 key guests to have a roundtable discussion around this concept of know yourself, but particularly around the idea of how to discern truth from falsehood. This is such a huge topic that we've talked to many different guests around. I really want to grapple with this. Like, how do we discern truth from falsehood, especially in a world where there seems to be so much different information and misinformation and disinformation, and difficult to try and understand truth from falsehood. So we want to have a really great conversation around that and see what our different guests bring to the table around that concept. So I think that's going to be really, really phenomenal. And I will give you more information around that as we get closer to it. But in the meantime, send in any questions that you might have around that concept of discerning truth from falsehood. And then during the live, you can also post in your own questions, and we'll have the panel discuss the questions that pop up during the live event. All right, guys, enjoy this episode, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Bye-bye. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast, and thank you for joining us back on our most recent series, Know Thyself, Questions to Facilitate the Return to Who We Truly Are. And I'm very excited to have a good dear friend of mine, Moshe Daniel Block. Now, some of you might have remembered Moshe from before when we were doing some of the episodes around Follow Your Oath. Moshe is a fellow Follow Your Oather and good friend of mine. We went back to school back in the day together. He's a naturopathic doctor. He's done a lot of amazing work. I'll get his stuff on there so you can see his links to everything as well and learn more about Moshe. But Moshe and I have been on the same page on a lot of this stuff. And Moshe is a really deep thinker too. So I've gotten to know him pretty well over the last year, and I really admire him, really respect him. And I wanted his input into this series as far as, as you know, if you've been watching some of these different guests, we're all posing different questions that really are there for us to contemplate. So don't just listen to it and then sit with it for a bit. These are all really, we're trying to get an experience. It's not just the information that you're going to come from watching the episode. It's to then sit with it and have an experience with it. Shut off from other stuff. Get away from external sources of information and allow these questions to help you move to a deeper sense of internal information. So all of this is to help you arrive at a deeper sense of who you truly are so that you can then live from that place. Living from that place of who we truly are when we connect to that is very different than living from a place of external influences. And that's really at the heart of why we're putting this series together. So Moshe, welcome to the show again.
Thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure, and definitely feel likewise lots of respect and admiration for you and the work that you're doing. It's a pleasure to be here. Really, really great to share. I love that you're creating this platform. It's beautiful.
It's been fun. I think in many ways it's been part of our saving grace for Tay and I. It's helped to motivate us and to kind of put our energy into a certain area that we think is really going to be supportive. It's why we keep doing different series. We ultimately do series to try to support what we think people need more support with. So parts of it was information, and it was how do you help to heal trauma? Where's medicine moving? And now I think right now it's really important for us to all collectively know ourselves more truly and deeper than we have in the past so that we can live from that place. And, this came up so many times, and I mentioned this before, but when people are confused, when people are scared, when people are worried, we aren't able to connect so easily to the information that I think is most valuable to us. We very easily hand our power over, and then we are looking for something to fix it. And that's not really where we make that's not where we should be making our most important decisions. Even groups like Heart Math Institute, they talk specifically that if we are making decisions from an incoherent place, basically like a place of sort of fight or flight, or where the heart-brain connection is not connected, we will not make as good decisions as we would if we are more connected. So before we make any big decisions in our life, we're ultimately trying to get back to that state of coherence where the heart and the brain are communicating. Collectively, we are getting information from both of them. And then we tend to make better decisions. So I think these questions are questions you want to contemplate from that place. So you kind of get settled down, and then you ask yourself these questions that all these different guests are bringing and see where they land for you. Like I said, my truth is not the same as Moshe's. It's not the same as what yours is going to be. This whole thing is for you to find your individual truth. And then from that place, can you live your life from there? So Moshe, from that opening, take wherever you'd like to go with the audience, and whatever questions you've contemplated yourself or you would like to share with them to contemplate, take it away wherever you want to go.
All right, great. Well, I think my favorite question I think it's the most important question we could ask ourselves. And it is the simple question, who am I? Who am I? Who am I, and who am I? And there's different ways of looking at it. You can even say, what am I? At a certain point, we can ask that question, what am I? And I love this question. I also love the movie Kung Fu Panda, and that question was featured beautifully, where Master Oogway, the turtle, was contemplating that for years, and then he achieved enlightenment. So that question is in yogic practice, like the Vedic yogic practice, not necessarily just the asana, the asanas where you're in the positions, but the philosophy of yoga. Basically, the jnana yoga, the self-inquiry, is at the peak of all yogic practice. So all of the yoga practice, talk about pranayama breathing and the positions and doing mantras and all of that. And whatever you do is ultimately a preparation for that question, which is quite amazing because it's just such a simple question. And it's the basis, the basis of the answer is basically the heart and soul of what helps me help people in my practice and how I'm training people in holistic counseling, the program. And inside of us, there dwells here. So here's a bit of a look at what one might get to in contemplation. I'm not the body, that's not who I am. I'm not this body. And one way that we can know that is by looking at those people who have had out-of-body experiences. So if you can have an out-of-body experience and you could look at your body laying there on the operating table or even on the bed if you're in meditation, we can say that you're not that body. And then we can keep extrapolating that, and philosophically that we could say, I am not anything that I can experience as a thing. I'm not that thing. Because if you look at the eye can see many objects. It picks up all these different objects, but the eye itself cannot see itself. And this is a beautiful thing to recognize in who we really are, which is pure consciousness. So who am I? I could say pure consciousness. Pure consciousness is the bottom. It's at the very end of all experience. So if I look at something, my eye sees it. I don't see my eye. But then that thing is translated into visual images along the optic nerve into the brain. The brain perceives these images, but the brain itself doesn't perceive itself. Then the mind picks up this information, and the mind will have a thought about it. Oh, I'm looking at a picture. I'm looking at a plant. But then ultimately where the buck stops is in the final, where the buck stops is at the foundation of all existence for we could say for our reality. Perhaps there's something beyond that, but for our reality, it is pure consciousness that experiences the thought of the mind. The mind does not experience the thought. It is the true self, which is pure consciousness, which experiences that thought and that emotion and that sensation in the body and through the five senses. So that which we are is this thing of pure consciousness. And when Moses asks God in the Old Testament, the Torah, he says, who will I tell the children of Israel what your name is? What will I say? And he says, Eya Asher Eya. That's the Hebrew for I am that I am, essentially. It's in the future, so it's I shall be as I shall be. But it really translates as I am that I am. So the identity of the divine is this sense of beingness. The verb to be is of such great essence. It's such great importance. And I think Shakespeare was onto that when he said, to be or not to be, that is the question. So that to be or not to be, that is the question. And it's the same question as who am I? So the answer is pure beingness. When we get into a place of suffering, it can be very alleviating of that suffering. It takes it down 1 to 2 to several notches. If I say, who is experiencing this emotional pain? Or who is experiencing this anxiety? Who is experiencing this physical pain or this flu that's very hard on my body? Who is experiencing it? So the answer to that question is very important, because if I can experience, I look at that, let's say I have emotional suffering. Well, I say, okay, I am experiencing the emotional suffering. But if I can experience it, I can point a finger at it, which means that it is not me, because you don't see yourself. You are yourself. It's like the eye doesn't see itself when it perceives an object. So whatever it can see, it knows that's not me. Same thing with painful emotion. Like if I'm in a very painful place emotionally, I go, okay, who is experiencing this? I am experiencing that. that is not me. And it creates separation. I'm not talking about suppression. I'm not trying to suppress my emotions. I'm experiencing that experience and have division from it, rather than if I identify with it, like this is me. I am this anger. The experience becomes completely different. So this is a very valuable question. And really, there's no end to that question, I think, until the ultimate hoorah, the full plunge into the glacial lake of pure I amness, pure beingness, where the mind is completely immersed in the experience. That's called samadhi in the yogic tradition, where there's cognitive absorption. So it's no longer, it's like, let's say I'm sitting here in meditation and I go, who am I? And I go, oh, there I am. That's me. As soon as I say that's me, I'm pointing to it again. And that's the mind. That's not the beingness. That's not the pure, absolutely effortless, infinite state of consciousness that is who we really are. So it's a weird thing, because the mind is very tricky and always tries to take control over reality. It's just like, we call that the monkey mind and stuff like that. So that when we have that full cognitive absorption, the mind is absorbed and is still. There's no movement of the mind. It's just pure stillness. It's like the mind acquiesces its control unto the pure beingness of our true identity. And so that's, I feel like that's a very, very wonderful thing to aspire towards. And even the word aspiration or, pathway, I'm going somewhere, that's all false. Because in actual fact, we always have been that which we truly are. We've always been the I am. When we were born as a little babe, we were experiencing being a baby. We're experiencing that being in a little body with emotions that are very raw and a very undeveloped intellect. And as we grow, we change. Everything is changing in us. And then we age and we die. And that's a big change. But the self, the true self, is always the same throughout all of that. It doesn't change. It's the only thing that is truly permanent. So, because I think philosophically, if you think about it for a while, how can you truly be? If we talk about identity, how can I be something that changes? How can that be my beingness, my identity? I can't. It can't be. Because then I'm not that. If I can change into something else, then I'm not that. So it's only that which is permanent. And when we can experience or even have the smallest grain of understanding, like in the deep level of who we really are, and there's just peace that comes, because we realize that all the things that we worry about, that we're attached to, that we think we need to complete ourselves, is false, because we don't need a thing. Who we truly are, and I don't mean like water and like, food. I mean emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. We don't need external things to complete us, because we already are that I am. We're already that I am. And that is the release point when I'm working with my patients, is that they've gotten attached to some idea that they need something to be happy. So they're trying to pursue that. And that pursuit is a stress. And that stress causes blockage of energy, and that causes illness. So when we go deep into the subconscious and we look where that choice that I need that to be healthy, to be happy, where it started from, it's usually childhood. It's usually because that child didn't get something from their parents that was their God-given right to receive, but their parents were wounded, like attention and love and whatever. But then they get attached that I need that. And they start pointing outside themselves, and they lose the sense of the self. They lose the attachment, not the attachment, but that beingness, that connectivity, and that beingness is what is peace and what is joy and what is truly healing for the wounded mind, for the wounded emotion as well. So that's my first question.
I like that, Moshe. And as people are going to get a feel for here too, it's like what you're talking about is something that is definitely very experiential, right? And so most of these things you do, and you made reference to it, but you do have to kind of find a certain degree of stillness to be able to start to connect to that. What I always find fascinating is that even when you get glimpses of it, right? I mean, it's not like you're necessarily everybody's going to be staying in that sort of state of awareness to that all the time, but it's a practice. The more that you kind of even have it as something important to want to connect to, then you will start to connect to it. And
Yes.
I know for me, especially when you get caught up in some of the all the worldly stuff that's going on, it's a really important time to come back to that place, because it really does simplify. I find like it really simplifies things so much. It's so easy to get caught up in a lot of these different pieces of what the world is expressing and what we're connecting to and attaching ourselves to. But when we do get that connection back to that stillness, what your perceptions of what is even important is very different. So two things I find happen is like my perceptions are very different when I'm in that place than when I'm not in that place, or when I'm not sort of more connected to who I really am. So then that very easily can change your actions, because you are seeing the world differently. And I also find from that place, you are privy to a different level of information or wisdom that you are not privy to when you're only caught up in the thinking mind. They're like completely different levels of frequency. One thing, we use the mind a lot, and that can help us get around stuff. But if you can connect to this type of a stillness, you access information in a very different way than how the thinking mind processes and receives information.
In the best possible way that you can. We could say it's that literally, like, you become like a channel for the best part of yourself, your higher self, or for the divine. All those things are the same. Like, imagine you're playing a sport, your favorite sport, could be soccer or golf, doesn't matter, whatever. And you're really up in your mind, you're processing everything, you're thinking a lot. You're going to have a terrible game, I guarantee it. But if the mind is still, then the body acts, sponsored by this beautiful energy, which permeates all things. And it's the same thing with life, that if let's say you have social anxiety, you're going out with people and your mind starts racing, like, how do I look? What am I doing? Am I saying that right? Am I holding myself? What are they going to think? Then you're not present, and you're completely off your game, if you want to call it that, a game, versus just being still, nothing to control here. Like, put away the control, because the idea of control, that we need to control, only stems out of fear that we're not okay. And if we believe we're not okay, that means we don't know who we are. So it could be just an indicator. Hey, I'm trying to control here. I feel some need to take over the situation, or to come over the top, or to say something smart, or to impress somebody. Whatever it is that we're doing that we feel we need to control, control is a clue that we're in the illusion self, not the true self. Because the true self just is. It doesn't need to do anything outside of that true state. So that's really a good focal point. One of the clues there.
Well, that's a great one for people to be aware of. When are we getting into caught up in needing to control our situation, or control exactly what is taking place?
Yes.
It's a big one for all of us. Where are we trying to control, right?
For sure.
And
And
then
that could
catch it.
even be with health.
Yeah.
Like, I do a lot of meditation. So I'm like, oh, I don't like that feeling in my back. I'm going to fix that. Now I'm going to start focusing in my mind on fixing that. And that's a kind of control too, versus, okay, I have this awareness. I can feel the pain in my back. Now I just let go. That's kind of like a vipassana sort of meditative state as well. Like I see the truth is the truth is the truth. Dr. Jim Sensenig said that all the time. Is a naturopathic doctor who passed last year. And it's true, like the truth resides in all the cosmologies. If you really look at them, you see the truth. You know, a shaman is sitting with a Sufi, who's sitting with a Kabbalist, who's sitting with a Christian mystic and a yogi, and they're all sitting around the fire, and they recognize in each other a different expression of that divine truth, but that it's the same truth, even though it has a different clothing to it, different language. Yeah. I think that was the end of my thought there. I feel
I think that's great. I think that gives people definitely some sort of an actionable, right? Everybody likes to have some kind of an actionable, like, how do I put this into practice, you know? So
yes.
I would say when you're asking that question, who am I, then to contemplate that and then find some place of sort of quiet where you can allow yourself to feel it, right? And see if you
Yeah.
can go. I always find too, like for me, it always helps whenever I can end up somewhere closer to nature, if I can hear water, if I can hear, you know, leaves blowing a little bit, it sets the stage. Nature naturally, I think, is a really good supporter for us to connect to what is real.
Absolutely, 100%. And you know, there's a beautiful psalm, the quote in the psalm that is a famous quote. It's "Be still and know that I am God." So a person can use that, and if you're not comfortable with using the word God, you could say, "Be still and know I am that I am," or you could say, "Be still and know I am that." And by that, we're talking about the self that you can only experience. You can't point at it because then it becomes an object. And you're not the object. You are the thing, the very thing that it is that. So yeah, that's a nice exercise to do. Be still and know I am that. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think all of that is incredibly insightful, very helpful. And any other questions or any other contemplations for people that you would like to send to them?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to just bring up Matthew 16:25. There's different translations of this. I'll look at this one, and you might know some other ones, but basically it's the quote is, "For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life will find it." And the quote here is that basically if we try to cling on to something, then we don't have it. It's like, because we desire that thing and we try to hold on to it, then we are affirming the lack of that thing, and therefore we don't have it, and therefore you're losing it. If you give up something, then that means that you're in a place of knowing that you don't need it, so to speak. And then it's easier to yield to peace, to truth. Those who, you know, you could see somebody who's in a place of fear. Let's say there's a bunch of starving people and a loaf of bread is thrown between them. We've seen that image in some movies. It's a very sad picture. And a bunch of people, they tear at it, and they are in a very dark place because they're so afraid for themselves. But the person who says, "No, you eat first," they're glowing with this majesty. You can see this divinity just living inside of them because they're affirming, and the mind is so powerful in creating our reality in creating the experience of this reality, not in creating who we really are, because that you don't create, you just are. That if you say, "I'm okay, I lay down my life, I don't need this, I'm okay," then you find your life because you live your life. Some say that, and I really agree with this, that the fear of death is really an unhappy way of saying that we're not living the way we want to. And I think Barry Neil Kaufman said that. And it's true. It's true. So this is a nice extension that our lives, like where we're holding on to our life, is where we are living in fear. And it's another indication, it's a form of control comes in, because we feel like we need to control to make ourselves live. But when we let go of needing to hold on to our life, then life is, and it fills in the space. And many, I think I've seen, and I know many blessings can come from that.
I think that is a perfect way to finish that, because this is something we're seeing firsthand with lots of people right now. I mean, in Canada, a lot of people have kind of gotten out for periods because they were just sort of fed up with what was going on.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've been out here, and we're out in Mexico, and we've met a lot of people from Canada that have come out that literally have picked up and left. And
Yeah. Yeah.
this feeling of letting go of what you've been previously clinging to, there is a sense of faith and trust, I think, in yourself and in a divine picture that allows you to start to be able to make some of those changes. And I think why it's so powerful for people is because surrender is inherent in that process. You have to surrender over to something greater than yourself when you really do
Yeah.
let go of the death grip on all of the things that we are so attached to. And right now I feel like, in our own way, let's pay attention to what we're really clinging tightly onto, and can we gradually loosen that grip a little bit and see what happens. Because I really agree with you a lot. I think that's a really important one right now. And in some ways, we're very, I was talking to Taya the other day, because I was having this sort of dream, and it was this picture of sort of like my life and these tentacles that were attaching to so many things, right?
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
kind of this feeling of being tethered to so many different things that are then pulling. And in the meditation dream, then I literally kind of took out like my samurai sword and started kind of slicing
Nice.
through those types of tethers. In for me, that was just my own way of kind of creating that feeling of freedom from it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting just to see, like, where are we so tightly tethered to? And also, if some of those systems change, you don't necessarily want to be completely tethered to them, right? It can be hard. So
Yeah.
I think
Right.
it's a good
Absolutely.
practice for all of us to sort of see, what don't we need to be so tightly tethered to? And can we start, that process, baby steps, right? With taking out that sword and cutting some of
Yeah.
those tethers that we've got. So very
Yeah.
insightful, Moshe. I think that's a really important one right now too. Ties very much with what you initially said too, because I feel like the more that we identify with the truth of who we are, there's just less fear in living.
Yes, exactly.
So
And
then
there's
the
so
big
much of
leaps aren't
the,
as scary.
yeah, so much of the wisdom of nature, of creation is opposite of what you might expect. Like if I put my will, if I force, then I'll get. But it's actually the opposite. It's if I let go and I surrender, then I have. If I want to live, so I have to fight, I have to grab on and cling on. Well, then I'm kind of dying inside with that struggle, that battle. If I let go, the life force it is in me, and I'm alive. Not to mention the recognition of being the I am comes with it the idea of immortality, that I've always been that. I
Mhm.
always will be that.
And a
Yeah.
different type of strength, like I think of even will, I think kind of there's different ways of perceiving that. I feel like if it's our will that is from a false sense of who we are, it's very limited. But if it's a will connected to who we really are, then it's almost an unstoppable will, right?
Yes.
Or how
Yes.
we would say, like, the will of God or something along those lines. And it
Yes.
feels very different inside your body, and it comes from a different place of authority within inside as well.
Right.
So
Right.
I think your question is going to help people, remind them how to connect back to that. So
Great. I'm so happy.
Moshe,
It's my honor.
thank you very much. I appreciate it, my friend.
I appreciate you too, and I thank you. God bless, and everybody who's listening to this, be still and know that you are, and it's a great privilege to be alive today.